morning, Early Head Start. We are so excited to have you join us for our second First 1000 Days Early Head Start Conference. This year, we have over 650 people participating from 76 unique agencies here in Region 9 and beyond. My name is Wasi Tesfa, and I am the Executive Director of Pacific Clinic's Head Start and Early Head Start in Pasadena, California. I'm also the chair of the Region 9 Head Start Association Board of Directors, along with leaders from the states of Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, and the Pacific region. So I welcome you in all our name. Our original plan was to host this conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. We had a lovely location selected, and the committee began the planning. Of course, COVID-19 disrupted that idea just like it disrupted a lot of our other ideas and plans. We do hope to return to Las Vegas next year. The silver lining here is the large number of staff that are participating and the intense online discussions and exchange of resources. We are not together, but I strongly encourage you to take time to read the Q&A in the sessions, chat during the live and pre-recorded workshops, and take advantage of the community space. There, you can swap resources, articles, and photos to underscore your perspective. And thank you to all our sponsors who assist this association with content and with financial support. In particular, this morning, I want to thank the OUNCE, our partner in this conference and this opening session. This morning, we have a very special keynote. Deborah Pacquiano, PhD, is VP of Translational Research at the Ounce of Prevention Fund. She's an educational psychologist and applied researcher with a focus on leveraging instructional leadership and organizational development to catalyze innovation and quality improvement in early childhood intervention and education settings. She is the co-principal investigator on the Early Education Essentials Organization Supports Measurement System, and was formerly co-principal investigator of U.S. Department of Education Investing in Innovation Development Grant. But before we go to her, I'm just as excited to introduce a wonderful Head Start leader from San Francisco, Region 9 Office of Head Start, Cynthia Yao. I know she is no stranger to most of us in Region 9. Cynthia Yao oversees the administration of funding, oversight, and training and technical assistance, the TTA, to Head Start grantees in Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, and the Outer Pacific Islands. Prior to serving in this role, she was an OHS Supervisory Program Specialist, OHS Program Specialist, and Region 9 TTA Content Expert for 6 years. Her professional experience also includes working in a juvenile prevention program, foster family agency, and child protective services. Please welcome Cynthia Yao.
Thank you, Wasi. Thank you so much. Good morning, Region 9. And I want to say to all of you out there in Hawaii, aloha, and to the Outer Pacific, talofa, half a day, and ali. And I'm so happy to be here this morning to greet you all on your conference. So, as we know, Early Head Start has a great impact in early childhood development. And this first 1,000 days, as I think this is a beautiful conference to have the second year in a row, is a unique time for brain development, health, and growth across a person's lifespan. And we know how important it is that all the work that you're doing for Early Head Start. So I'm very pleased to be here this morning to welcome you all to the conference. When Ed contacted me, one of his questions was about the Early Head Start waves and getting some history on Early Head Start. And so it got me thinking about just how much we've grown in Early Head Start across all of these years. And when I was looking at the different waves, the first wave we funded in 1995, we only funded 3 grants in Region 9, which grew grew by the end of 1999 to 50 grants. Today, in Region 9, as Wasi said, we cover California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, and the Outer Pacific. We had the pleasure also of introducing Early Head Start Child Care Partnership grants across the nation. So in Region 9, both Early Head Start and Early Head Start CCP, as we like to call it, we have 180 grants. We serve over 29,000 children in Early Head Start. And what I'll say is the funding that we've been able to receive to support all the programs in total for Early Head Start and CCP is a little over $514 million. So this just shows you just how much the need is, I think, across the nation as well as within Region 9, that we've been able to expand, to this magnitude, and the support that we have from the public and from Congress and, all the legislature to put funding into Early Head Start. Hopefully you all know, I'm going to do a little plug here, that there is a funding opportunity announcement out right now for Early Head Start Child Care Partnership. Right now, that funding is out and grants are due September 21st, 2020. And in California, we also have an opportunity to expand in Head Start or Early Head Start. So there's also an expansion grant out right now for any of you who are interested, which also closes September 21st, 2020. I didn't want to take too much time today because I do know we want to hear from Deborah, but I did want to share with you also in regard to where we're going as a region. And I'm sorry that I can't see you all in person and we're doing this virtually, but I think this also gives a great opportunity for, I think, more people to be able to participate in conferences such as these. And as Wasi said, please take advantage of listening in to all of the wonderful sessions that are available to you throughout the next 2 days. But what I did want to share with you is where we're going as a region to support all of you in the work that you're doing. So as you know, with the hit of COVID, we've been really working with providing programs with as much support as possible. And in particular, one of the areas we are really focusing on this coming year is virtual services. We do know many of you are operating in person and have slowly started to reopen, but in our focus group discussions, we heard very loud and clear that a lot of you are still needing a lot of support in virtual services. So as a region, we're taking on 3 levels of virtual services. The first is, how are we supporting our staff? Our staff in their capacity and their abilities to conduct and provide services virtually. It's different from being, in a classroom to, especially with Early Head Start, right? How do you connect with our infants and toddlers and our families in this new way? So we'll be spending some time doing that. And then we've also found a renewed, I think, focused in family engagement. This is actually a focus of one of our sessions that we're going to be doing as a region, but this is a big priority for us because we know that in this new virtual world, that our children wouldn't be able to participate in any of these services virtually if we don't have the partnership, the collaboration, and the engagement of our families. And I think now more than ever, it's even more important to ensure that we understand what those barriers or those challenges might be for families to be able to fully participate in our programs. So we're taking on family engagement, again, as a renewed focus for the region. And what I'll say too is community partnerships. And we're very happy to see that you're going to be hearing from Deborah today and what they're doing with OUNCE. But I want to also say that, again, now more than ever, I think with everything happening in the communities, with our families, and with our children, we really want you all to think about how are you partnering with the community? How are you leveraging those resources, the funding available in every community so that we can effectively serve our children and families? The other area that we're going to continue working on, this was a priority for us last year, is trauma-informed care approaches. And lastly, the other area that we started to introduce this summer and that we're going to also take on this year is implicit bias and racial inequities. So these are the priorities for our region. I'm really happy again to be here today, and I wish you all a wonderful conference. And I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that you do for Early Head Start, for our children, and for our families. And I'm going to turn it back over to Wasi. Thank you.
Video, please.
For me, we are at a crisis, and we're at an opportunity in our country. We can either look at what we know will continue building a strong society, a society of human beings that are full of empathy and compassion and have a sense of living together in a civilized way. We can be a country that strives for that, which I believe is what we're founded on. Our youngest learners, where the brain is the most active, the foundation of the very neural circuitry of the brain is intricately laid in the first 9 to 12 months of life, where language and the very foundation of conceptual thought is beautifully in place by 3 years of age. So much learning about being a human being, being a fellow citizen, being a scientist, being an entrepreneur, all of that, being the next president, happens in the first 5 years of life. And what we need in this country is an absolute investment in free, appropriate public education, beginning when learning begins, and that's at birth. And the ounce is on that. That's been our part of our mission since we were founded. And we continue, like a dog on a bone, to gather the right information, the right data, to show the impact that high quality, rigorous infant, toddler, preschool teaching and learning and family involvement can have on our most vulnerable learners. The very foundations for who we are as human beings, for who we are as learners, and for who we are as achieving Americans happens in the first 5 years of life. We can't have those children sitting around in a chair watching TV shows or being ignored or only being with people who are so multi-stressed that they're not having those joint sharing attentive moments with our young learners, when that brain is the most curious, when it's asking all of the questions, and when it's ready to absorb everything that we can offer to it. Lillian Katz, one of our heroes in early childhood education at the University of Illinois, says that every moment that we spend with a young learner should be worthy of their time. And the reason she says that is because of the exponential brain development that's happening in these first 5 years of life. It is the only way for us to continue to be human. To prevent is the human approach. Everything after that, every gap that a child has in their emotional development, in their academic development, in their behavioral development, is remediation. So let's prevent it. Let's have thriving, happy infant, toddlers, and preschoolers who arrive ready to go for our kindergarten teachers.
Good morning. I think I can be heard. I was given the cue to unmute.
Wasi, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Wonderful. Good morning, Region 9. I'm Deborah, and I am actually in Chicago, Region 5. But I have to tell you, in my fantasy world, I go to bed thinking about a move to the West Coast. In fact, yesterday, we had a session canceled because we had tornado sirens going off for myself and my colleagues who were about to present a pre-conference session. So I'm really thrilled to be here with you and glad that my internet and my electricity are working. Here's a beautiful, happy 25th birthday to Early Head Start. I think very fondly to the earliest part of my career and where I was when I first heard about Early Head Start. I was a school psychologist in Fairfax County Public Schools, and they were obviously a partner, a delegate of the Fairfax County Head Start grant, and I had my baptism by fire on Head Start, and then very quickly thereafter on Early Head Start, because we had multiple Head Start classrooms within our school district buildings. And I just remember thinking to myself as a psychologist, is there any other way to do education than the way this program is guiding its practitioners and its staff? So happy birthday, Early Head Start. You know, right now, the world is a pretty stressful place. We have the global health pandemic and crisis. We have an economic downturn, and we have the realities, again, in our face. These realities have always been there, but there's certainly more at the surface, that not everyone is living these stressors equally, but rather disproportionately burdened by race. And I want to take just a few minutes to kind of talk about that context and the idea of what can we draw on in our history, what can we draw on from our hearts that can guide us through. We know that we have decades of evidence indicating that high quality, well implemented early childhood home visiting and care and education positively affect parent-child relationships, and incredibly, the long-term learning trajectories of young children. But yet we know that the quality of those services and programs can vary tremendously. For example, on the preschool side of things, we know recent studies have shown us that the highest quality preschool programs continue to disproportionately serve children and families from the most advantaged homes. And we know that low income status continues to predict which children enter kindergarten behind. And we know that this global pandemic is further raising our focus on health and safety, of which we lead the world. And yet it's also raising our anxiety about reinventing services and practices for our most vulnerable young children and their families. But yet, don't we understand that interactions are at the heart of healing, right? Interactions are the way forward, and we have relied on that belief through all of these decades that have shown us that implementing our services well changes lives. One of the things that I want to talk about today is what are the enabling contexts that help practitioners? So some of you have seen this slide. At the ounce, we continue to refer to this as the equation slide. It's how have we been able to achieve such great things, such socially significant outcomes for young children and families? This decades of research that show that when we do our jobs well, when we use the effective interventions that are our home visiting national models, that are our early Head Start adopted national models and practices, that those effective interventions, when multiplied by effective ways of implementing those. So, you know, that's all of our early Head Start and Head Start emphasis on implementing those models and methods and practices with fidelity, with effectiveness, right? So when we multiply really good interventions by really good understanding of how we implement those with fidelity and effectiveness, and that all of that has to be supported and enabled, that the context in which practitioners work needs to be strong and supportive, and that together those three parts of this equation result in socially significant outcomes. So how do we seek insight? How do we figure out how to ignite our thinking about these enabling contexts when we look at research from adjacent fields? What is revealed about early childhood enabling contexts when we seek out and listen to the experiences of practitioners? Because what we know is that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity in this time of this global pandemic and the stressors in this world to implement innovative leadership, supervisory, home visiting, teaching and learning, and family engagement practice. We have an opportunity to facilitate meaningful conversations about race and about equitable access, use, and outcomes within our early childhood sector. And we have an opportunity, if not a moral responsibility, to promote self-care and resilience in our professional staff in order for them to promote the same in the children and families we serve. This is no easy calling, but there is research, there is insight to help remind us. I think today I'm going to share with you things that I hope and pray you go, duh, yeah, tell me more, lady. You know, nothing I share with you should be all that new. It should resonate in that place inside of us that we know what I'm talking about, that the research has finally caught up to our wisdom, that if we double down on these things, we can achieve these opportunities. We can make good on these opportunities. So I want to take you to adjacent research for just a minute. So again, I'm going to go back to my little guy here, person, and let's ignite our thinking about the enabling context. Let's figure out what research from other fields can teach us, and then I'll share with you how I've applied and looked for these research findings within early childhood as well. So what you're looking at here is a graphic of Chicago public schools from 1990 to 1996. This represents the total study was about 475 schools, pre-K through 8th grade across the city of Chicago. And what you're looking at here are lines of the schools posting the highest positive trends on improvement in student engagement and math achievement, and the schools posting the lowest or negative trends over that same exact time period. So I want you to think about this for a little bit. Usually when I'm in person with all of you, I'll find and connect with somebody through eye contact, and I will say, what are you wondering about? And most people say to me immediately, holy cow, what's the difference between the schools in that top line and the schools in the bottom line? And every time you hear me say the word school, I want you to put in there program, center, right? We know that the work of loving and working with children and families unites us more than setting divides us. So anytime you hear me say the word school, I want you to insert my program, my home visiting program, my center, my early Head Start center. So yes, everybody says to me, oh my gosh, what's the difference? What were they doing differently? And the second question somebody usually says is, wow, this separation between high performance and low performance really seemed to happen quickly, like in the first couple years, right around 1991. So what's really critical is that this long-term study really found that it's the enabling context that made all the difference in the world. So back to this slide for a second, right? Schools had their chosen effective interventions. They had their methods of ensuring high quality or high fidelity implementation of those things. But what made the difference between the schools in this top line and the schools in the bottom line was the enabling context. And the most important aspect of that enabling context was leadership. It was leadership and supervision, followed by, very importantly here, followed by the quality of the professional learning discourse, conversation, and collaboration among the staff in the program. And what were those people talking about? What were some of the other enabling contexts? Leaders and supervisors made sure that staff had time to talk about their practice and the ambitiousness of that practice, the aspirationalness of that practice. Leaders and supervisors made sure that staff could collaborate and talk regularly about the engagement and involvement of families. And very importantly, leaders and supervisors made sure that staff could collaborate and talk about and grapple with how to make sure environments were as supportive as possible for children and families. These enabling contexts, the health of those conditions as I laid them out briefly, that explained the difference between the schools performing in the top line and those in the bottom line. The big take home here is that the way staff are communicating and relating to each other and to leaders and supervisors was a far greater predictor of the success and improvement of a program than was any other school quality characteristic. Isn't that really profound? And yet, at the same time, we should all be shaking our heads, right? We should all be going, I knew that, girl. And it's about time the research caught up. So now some of you are saying to yourselves, tell me a little bit more about, really, Deborah, really the collaboration and conversation predicted improvement more than any other variable? Yes. So this is research from New York public schools. And what you see here is that over time, the quality of the professional collaboration and conversation and discourse going on in a school among teachers actually predicted teachers' improvement in their practice and student achievement, such that when teachers were in a school where they were talking regularly with their peers about practice, about engaging families, about what we believe about supporting learning and development, what they found is those teachers over a 10-year career improved their practice and student achievement 38% more than their colleagues in less and less supportive contexts for their professional development. This is profound. This is why the enabling contexts that are so important is that regular social emotional support, staff to staff, peer to peer, leaders shaping, guiding, and supporting this complex work and the decisions that we ask our practitioners to make all the time. That is the number one way to predict whether or not a program will improve over time. So some of you are really, you're going to put my feet to the fire here. You're going to say, I don't know, that's like pre-K to 12. What about early childhood? We are special. Yes, we are. And so 10 years ago, I, very supported by my organization, we and several just really prescient philanthropists and private funders, they said, okay, Deborah, go show us if these same enabling contexts matter in early childhood. And guess what? They do. Simply put, what we did was we created surveys based on the surveys used in K-12, but we customized them, we tailored them, we rewrote them, we refit them for preschool pedagogy and preschool context. So now I'm talking preschool for a second, but know that my work, I'm right now in the middle of bringing this work, validating this work for 0 to 2 settings as well. But I want you to, again, rise above the setting or the particular program type. What we're talking about here are conditions for human beings. The conditions that enable human devotion, commitment, performance, right? So I want you to stay on that journey with me. It's less about a particular setting or a particular nature of the work with children and families, home visiting or center. It's more about human performance, heart, mind, and what humans need to do well. And simply put here, my research showed that programs that were strongly organized to those essentials that I just described in K-12, when their scores on surveys asking them about these enabling conditions, asking them about climate and condition, when those scores said, yes, we are organized to these things, I receive these kinds of supports, this is my experience. When that was the case, what we learned is that the program context was far more supportive of teaching, learning, and family engagement than the context created by weekly organized programs. And very importantly, programs with strong enabling context, again, they took the surveys, they said, this is going on for me. Those contexts empowered leaders, teachers, staff, and families to realize, to aspire to, and achieve higher quality practices and therefore better outcomes for young children. Pretty cool, right? So we did take the time to make sure that this was relevant for us in early childhood settings. So when I look back on that research, which was both quantitative and qualitative, and what I mean by that is we related the staff and parent voice and perception data to classroom assessment scoring system data, to children's attendance, to rates of chronic absenteeism, and we spent days on end in the actual settings where things were well organized and where things were not organized to these contexts, to these conditions. And we listened and further interviewed staff, teachers, parents, bus drivers, everybody. And what we found is that these 4 research-driven statements are really important for us to consider. That it is always about everything. That the role of a supervisor, the role of a leader is really tough, right? But that we have to understand, even though it really is always about everything, every aspect of our program, every aspect of our design, it's not always the same intensity and focus, right? Another really important research-driven statement from this data, from this research on the enabling context, is that we have to use data and information from multiple perspectives to make changes in the present. Otherwise, children and families lose. And very importantly, we risk squandering the motivation of our professionals to change. Third, a leader's and a supervisor's job is not to help people. It is to help people get better. I'm going to read that again. Our job as a leader, site leader, program leader, supervisor, is not to help our supervisee, our practitioners. It is to help our practitioners get better. And we must get proximate. We must get really close up to the work, compassionately, in order to shape it and guide that work better. What we found in our research is compassionate meant in a loving, supportive, facilitative, and knowledgeable way, rather than control, command, and transactional kinds of interactions and relationships. We have to get into the reason our practitioners are in this work and have great compassion for the complexity of that work, and now the added complexity of COVID-19, reinventing our interactions, reinventing the format of those interactions. So we have, as leaders and supervisors, we must have compassion on that and devote ourselves to creating the supportive, enabling conditions for that hard work. When we look at the research on these enabling conditions, here are some research-driven statements about professional development. Staff must have regular protected time, weekly and monthly, to meet together with their peers, to plan, to problem solve, and very importantly, to observe each other's practice. Staff need to have that regular reflective supervision, right? We are leaders of this in the entire field of early childhood and certainly in the field of K-12 education. We understand the importance of reflective supervision. This provides opportunities for every practitioner to examine their own practice and those very important underlying patterns of thought that give rise to practice, hold us back from change. Collaboration routines that are structured, that are informed by data, and very importantly, focused on the immediate problems of practice that our home visitors, our teachers, our cooks, whoever it is, the immediate problem of practice that they're having and that they need to improve in order for outcomes to improve. And very importantly here, we can't assume that what we're doing in the name of these enabling conditions, that what we're doing to support our practitioner growth and development and performance, that what we're doing is helpful. So the other research-driven statement here is that we must know that our staff are endorsing how critical these conversations and co-planning with their peers is to their teaching and practice effectiveness. All right, let's spend a little bit of time on some of our next steps, right? What have we found about how we can help programs develop this strong enabling context for their practitioners to be at their best? Very practical steps that organizations, site leaders, program supervisors can do is to adopt a theory of action that is focused on centered on or focused on supporting practitioner well-being as the mediator to effective implementation, to improvement, to outcomes achievement, and very importantly, to my canceled session yesterday, to retention of staff, right? And I'm going to give you some quotes about why this is true. When we conceptualize that as an organizational focus, that improvement is not on the backs of the practitioner alone, right? That we are in this together and that practitioners perform better, they feel better, they're committed to the program, they are committed, they make these practice commitments that sometimes are hard, very hard for them to implement, right? They do that when their well-being is cared for. Now again, you should all be going, heck yes, Deborah, I knew that. Of course you knew that, because it's what we do with children and families, right? We make sure their well-being is the priority. We make sure they feel connected, loved, cared for, protected. We must do that for our staff. We have to clarify our core beliefs and commitments about practice, about children and families, and about what it takes, about the collective action for actually making sure every single child, every single family has the benefits as promised by our programs. We need to support leaders and supervisors with prioritizing their leadership practices, their interactions that shape and guide practice, their commitment to strengthening these essential supports and enabling context for their practitioners. We have to create an annual calendar that allocates and protects time for weekly and monthly collaboration opportunities and that ever so important individual reflective supervision. And then we need to track and broadcast how, by surrounding our practitioners with these strong enabling contexts, we have transformed their experiences. We have raised their well-being. We have raised their performance. We have raised their commitment to the field and to your programs. And yes, child and family outcomes. So again, if I were with you, I hope you can feel my hug. I hope you can feel that I'm really in this with you. And so I want to just end here on asking you, raising some questions for you to consider. In what ways will strengthening effective leadership and the opportunities staff have to collaborate with one another contribute to the success of your grantee, your organization, your center's vision, strategic plan, or quality improvement plan? Here's a quote from a Head Start, early Head Start grantee director. She says, "I really began to understand that it is our responsibility that our staff are learning and growing so that they can help children and families learn and grow. We have to lead that. We have to provide that structure for that in order for that to happen." Here's another question for us. How can you use the existing meetings and routines in your program, in your center, to strengthen the professional development so it is inquiry-based, it's collaborative, it's job-embedded, right? This research, the enabling context that is collaboration, it's a new and transformed way of thinking about PD, right? It is way beyond training. Training can tee up knowledge, right? It can nuance knowledge. But what we're talking about here and what this research in K-12 and now early childhood is telling us is it is the daily, weekly, and monthly conversations, looking at data together, grappling with problems of practice, where development and learning is happening, where it's not happening, right? That is what we need to understand is PD that is job embedded and becomes an enabling context. This is from a program or site leader voice. She says, "I was truly stretched. From my point of view, the greatest shift that happened in my thinking was viewing myself as a leader of practice. This idea that my primary role is to provide the supports organization-wide so teachers can be great." Again, insert home visitors can be great. Family engagement staff can be great. Early interventionists can be great. I need to make sure that they can engage and benefit from routine collaboration so they can improve their practice and children's learning. Here's a supervisor voice. We needed to ensure that we had a shared understanding of what interactions look like. And how did she do that? Yep, they provided training, but then she says, she goes on, we changed our lesson plan format to include intentional reflection and decision-making about class-based practices that the teachers were focusing on. And this is what's so critical here about the enabling condition that's created. She says, by using a shared language and by giving them regular time to discuss and plan together, it helped teachers articulate what they were doing and to identify good practices when they saw their colleagues engage in them. By the way, this is the actual leader. Her name is Grace Araya. She's here in Chicago. We treasure her, and this is her team, and this is her quote. I want you to consider surveying your practitioners and your families to gain their voice and experiences with program climate and conditions, those enabling contexts that surround practice and interactions. Record current attendance rates for staff and children and families. Record current staff turnover rates and the rates of families who do not continue from early Head Start on into your Head Start programming. And then I want you to broadcast the positive changes in the reported experiences and rates of attendance and turnover once you have focused on strengthening these conditions for their practice. And now I want to give you some teacher voice, and I'll conclude here on a couple of these. One of my favorite things is that in other centers, I've noticed it's just the teachers sitting in a room and learning. Here, it's the whole staff. I mean, even our custodian sat in on a couple of things. I think that's pretty remarkable, and I know that's unusual. That doesn't happen everywhere. But it's nice to know that when you're walking down the hall, the things that we know are the best practices are being shared with everybody in the entire center. Can you hear her sense of urgency, of commitment, of support? This is a place she doesn't want to leave, right? And then lastly, I feel like it's empowering here. It's not just from the top down. We believe in this stuff and I have something to share and it's valued by your administrator. And your co-teachers and your colleagues also buy into, and you have that energy. And listen to this, and you have that love. It's about an administrator that pushes you in that way and supports you and guides you and nudges you a bit further. It's what we're expected to do with our young students, even now when they are only 3. So she leads by example for sure. I think what's so critical and what I'd like to end on is that everything that brought us to Head Start, to early Head Start, is this fundamental belief in humanity. It's the fundamental understanding that relationships and interactions are what heal us and propel us forward. Let us take that same understanding to each other in our relationships within our programs. Let us create the conditions that allow people who are charged with such complex work, such mission-based work, to have the supports where they can feel confident, competent, and have a sense of urgency and promise that no matter what comes towards us, no matter what the problem of practice is, no matter what the global pandemic and those crises provide us, that by returning to those relationships, returning to those interactions, returning to clarifying our core beliefs, and then literally structuring interactions, structuring those supports, that people will perform and they will stay committed. They will stay with you. They won't want to go anywhere else. Let us do this together. Thank you. Let's continue this conversation. We have a community room. I love it because this really wasn't a conversation, but in the community room, you can do more talking, you can do more reflecting, and I can give you more love and affirmation. So there's a Zoom link to that community room, and now I'm going to turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. This was a very wonderful, impassioned, intelligent training that you gave us. And I think one of the things we really have to think about is how we're going to do this with remote learning also. It was easier to do it on site when we're in the classrooms, but you did give us a lot of food for thought. And I really appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. So thank you so much. And Cynthia, thank you for bringing us news from your office and OHS. It's always great to hear new opportunities, and you've given me thought personally. Maybe I should go for some of what you're recommending. So thanks a lot, everyone. Okay, and the rest of you, I think you have a little time to look at the schedule. Our conference started off real nice. And thank you, Ed Condon. Bye.
I feel very excited and nerve-wracking because it's my first baby.
I really don't know exactly how I'm gonna feel until I have her, but now I'm just excited and I can't wait.
I'm constantly talking with her, showing her things. It's never a dull moment with my daughter.
He's just been growing and growing and growing, and he started walking a week after his first birthday.
It's not a surprise when he comes home and I start singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and he's doing hand movements with the song that he's learned at school.
Everything that we provide or do comes through the lens of the parent-child relationship. And so thinking with parents about who is this baby that's maybe not born yet, or who is this baby who's here now? What is he telling you? Or what does she show you? And how do you want to form a relationship with somebody who depends on you for everything?
we don't just care about their children, we care about the whole family as a whole. So we do home visits to interact with the families and see how the children are in their natural habitat. We also have family support here that builds strong relationships with the families.
I believe my children are more motivated and ready to move through the school system because they were given the building blocks to help them when they got into their programs from kindergarten through 8th grade.
Be patient with your children and spend as much time with them as you can. It will be worth it in the end. I know it will.